sat a great ruined idol, a colossal Buddha, while to the rear of the idol, built of yellow stone, appeared the low crescent shaped mass of a monastery. "At last!" cried Leo. "Oh Heaven, at last!" And flinging himself down, he buried his face in the snow as though to hide it there, lest I should read something written on it which he did not desire that even I should see. I let him lie a space, understanding what was passing in his heart, and indeed in mine also. Then going to the yak that, poor brute, had no share in these joyous emotions but only lowed and looked round with hungry eyes, I piled the sheepskin rugs on to its back. This done, I laid my hand on Leo's shoulder, saying in the most matter of fact voice I could command, "Come, if that place is not deserted, we may find food and shelter there, and it is beginning to storm again." He rose without a word, brushed the snow from his beard and garments and came to help me to lift the yak to its feet, for the worn out beast was too stiff and weak to rise of itself. Glancing at him covertly, I saw on Leo's face a very strange and happy look. A great peace appeared to possess him. We plunged upwards through the snowy slope, dragging the yak with us to the terrace whereon the monastery was built. Nobody seemed to be about there, nor could I discern any footprints. Was the place but a ruin? We had found many such. Indeed, this ancient land is full of buildings that had once served as the homes of men, learned and pious enough after their own fashion, who lived and died hundreds or even thousands of years ago, long before our Western civilisation came into being. My heart, also my stomach, which was starving, sank at the thought, but while I gazed doubtfully, a little coil of blue smoke sprang from a chimney, and never, I think, did I see a more joyful sight. In the centre of the edifice was a large building, evidently the temple, but nearer to us I saw a small door, almost above which the smoke appeared. To this door I went and knocked, calling aloud, "Open, open, holy Lamas, strangers seek your charity." After a while there was a sound of shuffling feet and the door creaked upon its hinges, revealing an old, old man clad in tattered yellow garments. "Who is it? Who is it?" he exclaimed, blinking at me through a pair of horn spectacles. "Who comes to disturb our solitude, the solitude of the holy Lamas of the mountains?" "Travellers, sacred one, who've had enough of solitude," I answered in his own dialect with which I was well acquainted. "Travellers who are starving and who ask your charity, which," I added, "by the Rule you cannot refuse." He stared at us through his horn spectacles, and able to make nothing of our faces, let his glance fall to our garments, which were as ragged as his own and of much the same pattern. Indeed they were those of Tibetan monks, including a kind of quilted petticoat and an outer vestment not unlike an Eastern burnous. We had adopted them because we had no others. Also they protected us from the rigours of climate and from remark, had there been any to remark upon them. "Are you Lamas?" he asked doubtfully, "and if so, of what monastery?" "Lamas sure enough," I answered, "who belong to a monastery called the World, where, alas, one grows hungry." The reply seemed to please him, for he chuckled a little, then shook his head, saying, "It is against our custom to admit strangers unless they be of our own faith, which I am sure you are not." And much more is it against your rule, holy Khubilghan, for so these abbots are entitled, to suffer strangers to starve," and I quoted a well known passage from the sayings of Buddha which fitted the point precisely. "I perceive that you are instructed in the books," he exclaimed with wonder on his yellow, wrinkled face, "and to such we cannot refuse shelter. Come in, brethren of the monastery called the World. But stay, there is the Yak, who also has claims upon our charity," and turning he struck upon a gong or bell which hung within the door. At the sound another man appeared, more wrinkled and to all appearance older than the first, who stared at us open mouthed. "Brother," said the abbot, "shut that great mouth of yours, lest an evil spirit should fly down it. Take this poor yak and give it fodder with the other cattle." So we unstrapped our belongings from the back of the beast, and the old fellow, whose grandiloquent title was Master of the Herds, led it away. When it had gone, not too willingly, for our faithful friend disliked parting from us and distrusted this new guide, the abbot, who was named Kou en, led us into the living room, or rather the kitchen of the monastery, for it served both purposes. Here we found the rest of the monks, about 12 in all, gathered round the fire of which we had seen the smoke, and engaged, one of them in preparing the morning meal and the rest in warming themselves. They were all old men, the youngest could not have been less than 65. To these we were solemnly introduced as "Brethren of the monastery called the World, where folk grow hungry," for the abbot Kou en could not make up his mind to part from this little joke. They stared at us, they rubbed their thin hands, they bowed and wished us well and evidently were delighted at our arrival. This was not strange, however, seeing that ours were the first new faces which they had seen for 4 long years. Nor did they stop at words, for while they made water hot for us to wash in, 2 of them went to prepare a room, and others drew off our rough hide boots and thick outer garments, and brought us slippers for our feet. Then they led us to the guest chamber, which they informed us was a propitious place, for once it had been slept in by a noted saint. Here a fire was lit and, wonder of wonders, clean garments, including linen and all of them ancient and faded, but of good quality, were brought for us to put on. So we washed, yes, actually washed all over, and having arrayed ourselves in the robes, which were somewhat small for Leo, struck the bell that hung in the room and were conducted by a monk who answered it, back to the kitchen, where the meal was now served. It consisted of a kind of porridge, to which was added new milk brought in by the Master of the Herds, dried fish from a lake, and butter tea, the last 2 luxuries produced in our special honour. Never had food tasted more delicious to us, and, I may add, never did we eat more. Indeed at last I was obliged to request Leo to stop, for I saw the monks staring at him and heard the old abbot chuckling to himself. "Oh ho! The monastery of the World where folk grow hungry," to which another monk who was called Master of the Provisions replied uneasily that if we went on like this, their store of food would scarcely last the winter. So we finished at length, feeling, as some book of maxims which I can remember in my youth said all polite people should do, that we could eat more, and much impressed our hosts by chanting a long Buddhist grace. "Their feet are in the path, their feet are in the path," they said astonished. "Yes," replied Leo, "they have been in it for 6